It is 7:48 a.m. at Shinjuku Station. The platform is packed. Hundreds of people waiting for the same train, which is due in exactly 4 minutes. The crowd is dense, shoulder to shoulder, briefcases and backpacks and umbrellas, a compressed mass of humanity that in almost any other city in the world would be a chaotic, anxious, every person for themselves scramble for position. But look closer. Everyone is standing in lines. Straight, orderly, parallel lines. 2 per door, sometimes 3, marked by painted guides on the platform floor. Nobody is pushing. Nobody is angling for a better position. Nobody is pretending not to see the line and drifting to the front. The lines are not enforced by staff. There are no barriers, no ropes, no attendants standing with outstretched arms keeping order. The train arrives. The doors open precisely where the lines end. The people on the train exit. And then, without instruction, without announcement, without anyone being told what to do, the 2 lines part slightly to let the exiting passengers through, wait for the last person to step off, and then file in. Calmly, in order. No one pushing, no one rushing. The doors close. The train departs. The whole process took less than 30 seconds. You have just witnessed something that happens millions of times per day across Japan. So consistently, so automatically, so completely without friction, that the Japanese people doing it barely notice it's happening. The perfect cue. And understanding why Japan cues the way it does is understanding something essential about what Japan is.
Start with something physical, the painted markings on Japanese train platforms. Most major train stations in Japan have clear markings on the platform floor showing passengers exactly where to stand while waiting. Arrows, lines, footprints, sometimes numbered positions corresponding to specific train doors. These markings exist in many countries, but in Japan, people actually follow them precisely, without being reminded. The markings matter, but they are not the cause of the queue. They are an expression of it. A culture that already believed in orderly waiting created physical infrastructure to support orderly waiting. The infrastructure then reinforced the culture. Each element confirmed and strengthened the other. This is different from the infrastructure as enforcement model that most countries default to. In many transit systems around the world, barriers, turnstiles, roped queuing lanes, and security staff exist specifically because the assumption is that without them, people will not queue. The infrastructure substitutes for willing compliance. In Japan, the infrastructure assumes willing compliance and gets it. But why? Why does a Japanese commuter, standing on a crowded platform at rush hour, under no physical or legal compulsion to do so, voluntarily stand in a neat line and wait their turn? The answer is not simple. It is layered, historical, psychological, social, and deeply practical all at once.
Like almost every behavioral norm in Japan that visitors find remarkable, the perfect queue begins in school. Japanese elementary schools are extraordinarily deliberate about the formation of social habits. From the earliest years, children are taught to line up. For lunch, for transitions between classrooms, for entering and leaving the school building, for fire drills, for sports day. Lining up is not presented as a necessary inconvenience. It is presented as an expression of respect for your classmates, for the teacher, for the shared activity you are all about to participate in. The concept at the heart of this is junban, taking turns, proceeding in order. Junban is not merely a procedural rule. It is framed as a moral value, the fair and respectful way to share access to something that everyone wants. Cutting in line is not just impolite in Japan. It is a violation of fairness, a claim that your time is worth more than someone else's. a refusal to participate in the collective agreement that makes shared spaces function. Children who cut in line in Japanese schools are not simply told off and sent back. The social response from peers is often more powerful than any adult intervention. The visible discomfort of classmates, the quiet but unmistakable signals that what just happened was wrong, the restoration of order through social pressure rather than authority. By the time a Japanese child has spent 12 years lining up for lunch, for the library, for the water fountain, for the school bus, lining up has stopped being a behavior and become an identity. It is simply what you do, how you move through shared spaces, part of the fabric of who you are in relation to other people. The adult who stands in a perfectly straight line on a train platform at rush hour is, in a very real sense, the same child who learned to line up for the school canteen at age 6, carrying that same sense of junban into every shared space they will ever enter for the rest of their life.
There is an ethical dimension to Japan's queuing culture that goes deeper than mere politeness, and understanding it explains why the queue holds even under pressure. The queue, in Japanese social understanding, is one of the purest expressions of fairness. It is a system in which advantage is determined entirely by one thing: when you arrived. Not by how wealthy you are, not by how important you are, not by how aggressively you position yourself. You arrived when you arrived, and you wait your turn accordingly. This matters in a society where many other forms of hierarchy, seniority, company rank, social status, are taken very seriously. The queue is one of the few spaces where hierarchy is deliberately suspended. The company president and the part-time convenience store worker stand in the same line and wait the same amount of time. The queue is an equalizer. And in Japan, that equality is protected with something approaching moral seriousness. Cutting in line is understood not just as rudeness, but as a kind of theft. Taking something, a position, a reduced wait time, that belongs to someone else who earned it by arriving earlier. It is a unilateral violation of the social contract. And in a culture where the social contract is maintained through collective participation rather than external enforcement, violations of it carry a particular weight. There is also a practical logic that the Japanese are very clear about. If everyone waits their turn, the system works efficiently, and everyone gets what they came for in a reasonable time. If even a small number of people start cutting, the system degrades rapidly. Wait times increase for everyone, trust erodes, and the incentive to cut increases further as the queue becomes less reliable. The mathematics of social cooperation are visible and well understood. The perfect queue is, in this sense, a rational choice, not just a cultural reflex. Japanese commuters queue because they understand, implicitly, that the queue is the system that works, and that working systems deserve to be maintained. Something else is happening in Japan's queues that is harder to name, but visible once you look for it. In many countries, waiting in line is experienced as dead time, frustrating, passive, something to be endured. People in queues in Western cities are almost universally on their phones, visibly impatient, fidgeting, sighing. The queue is an imposition, an obstacle between you and what you want. In Japan, the queue is experienced differently. It is simply where you are right now. The next thing will happen when it happens. Patience, gaman in Japanese, is not a virtue in Japan in the sense of being something difficult that deserves praise. It is simply a normal human capacity that you apply when the situation calls for it. Gaman means endurance, perseverance, bearing difficulty with dignity and without complaint. It has deep roots in both Buddhist and Confucian thought. The idea that accepting the present moment, whatever it contains, is a form of maturity and strength, not passive resignation, calm, dignified endurance. The person standing quietly in a long queue in Japan is not suppressing frustration. They are exercising gaman, occupying the present moment fully,
without resistance, without the mental energy spent fighting against a situation that simply is what it is. This is why Japanese queues are not just orderly, they are calm. The emotional texture is different. There is no ambient hostility, no competitive tension, no sense of everyone calculating whether they can gain a few places without being caught. There is just people waiting, together, for the same thing, at the same pace. It creates an atmosphere in shared spaces that is almost meditative, and it is contagious. Step into a Japanese queue and you will find, almost without trying, that your own impatience settles. The social environment is doing something to you. You are being, quietly and without being asked, held to a different standard, and finding, perhaps to your surprise, that you can meet it.
To understand the strength of Japanese queuing culture, it helps to look at the moments when it has been tested and what happened. The most extraordinary example is the aftermath of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, one of the worst natural disasters in recorded history. Nearly 16,000 people died. Entire coastal towns were erased. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. Supply chains collapsed. Basic necessities, food, water, fuel, became scarce overnight. And the queues held. At supermarkets, people lined up quietly for hours to receive whatever limited supplies were available. At petrol stations, queues of cars stretched for kilometers, drivers waiting for days in some cases, without incident. Looting, the near universal response to disaster-induced scarcity in most of the world, was essentially absent. This was not enforced by police or military. There was no capacity to enforce it. It held because the people in those queues had internalized so deeply that even the most extreme pressure could not dislodge it. The belief that taking more than your fair share, stepping out of your place in the order, was simply not something you did. International media were baffled. Disaster correspondents, accustomed to reporting on post-catastrophe breakdown of social order, had almost nothing to report. The social order did not break down. The queue continued. What this reveals is something important about the nature of Japan's behavioral norms. They are not performative. They are not maintained because things are going well and everyone is comfortable. They are structural features of Japanese character, present under pressure, present in scarcity, present when the normal systems that might have enforced them were gone. The queue in Japan is not a convenience. It is a value.
So, why do Japanese people queue perfectly? Because the queue in Japan is not a system imposed from outside. It is an expression of something held from within. It begins in a primary school classroom, where a 6-year-old learns that taking turns is not just practical, it is fair, and fairness is non-negotiable. It is reinforced through 12 years of school, decades of shared commutes, thousands of small moments in which the queue was the obvious, natural, morally right response to a shared space and shared need. It is held in place by gaman, the Japanese capacity for patient endurance, and by the deeply understood logic that cooperative systems work, and working systems deserve protection. And it was tested, truly tested, in the ruins of a natural disaster that killed 16,000 people and displaced hundreds of thousands more. And it held. The perfect queue is not a quirk of Japanese culture. It is a window into its core, into the belief that shared spaces are sacred, that fairness is the foundation of community, and that the way you behave when no one is watching, when there is no barrier, no staff member, no enforcement mechanism, is the truest measure of who you are. On a crowded platform at Shinjuku Station at 7:48 on a Tuesday morning, millions of Japanese commuters give that answer silently, automatically, and without a second thought, every single day.